Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to History of World Civilizations, Lecture 1. For Week 1, we'll be looking at Chapters 1 through 3 today. And this is Miss Hilderman, and I'm looking forward to walking you through some of the material that you'll be reading this week. And mostly what I'm going to do in these lectures is point out some learning objectives that I would like you to focus on as you read the material. And then also just some things for you to be aware of as you're reading, and some specific things that I'd like for you to focus on. So let's go ahead and let me say a prayer first over our time together, and then we'll go ahead and begin with Week 1. So would you join me in prayer? Father, I thank you for the opportunity I have to spend time sharing this information with these students. Thank you for their participation in the class. I ask that this time would be beneficial to them, not just the lecture time, but also their entire course experience. I pray that it would be challenging to them, that they would be able to learn the material well, and be able to accomplish the things that are set before them with excellence and with integrity. Thank you for this, and we ask this in Christ's name. Amen. Okay, if you haven't already gone on the website and printed out the lecture notes, I would encourage you to stop the recording and go ahead and do that now. The lecture notes consist of several learning objectives, and there are already several listed on there for you, but I'm going to highlight several more as I go through some of the different slides, and so I'd like for you to have that in front of you as you go through. So with that, let's go ahead and begin. Okay, Robert Strayer is the author of our book, Ways of the World, and he doesn't mention this until he gets to Chapter 3, but I think that it's a very important place to start. He says somewhere in Chapter 3 that historians always have to answer the question of, how did everything get started? And that is obviously a question when dealing with world history that we need to explore. And one of the things that I want you to be very aware of as you are using this textbook is the perspective from which Strayer writes and thereby teaches. I will be very honest and say that he does not teach from a relatively conservative perspective, nor from what we would consider a biblical perspective about many places, many people groups in the world. I think that is something that hopefully you will notice as you read all of these chapters, and with the beginning question of how did everything begin, I think you'll notice it right off. Strayer doesn't specifically answer the question of how things were created, but he definitely does not, does not give the biblical perspective on that, and so that will be very evident to you. But with that, in Chapter 1, titled First Peoples Populating the Planet, from the beginning to 10,000 BCE, which is before the Common Era. There are several things that I want you to look at and pay attention to. One, I already mentioned, is how he answers the question of origins. How did the Earth get here? How did the first people groups come about? Where did they come from? You will notice, obviously, that he has a very evolutionary perspective, which is very different from what Christianity and the Christian church teaches. But within that, he will explore several of the beginning kind of hunter-gatherer type groups. We've probably heard that throughout our time. If you think back to your early history classes, the hunters and the gatherers. And one of the things that I want you to pay attention to as you do your reading is exploring how what life was like for the hunters and the gatherers, what life was like in their societies, if you can even call them societies, and how that was different from our own. Some of them are similar, some of them are very different, and so that is something for you to add to your chapter learning objectives that you need to be paying attention to. And as you go through your reading this week, you'll notice in chapter 1, this is a map from page 14, and it gives kind of the easiest explanation of how Strayer believes people groups, these first hunters and gatherers, moved throughout the world. You can see right here in the center that it starts in he believes in Africa, and then expands out into the like the Fertile Crescent area, what we would today call the Middle East, and then from there spreading up to Eurasia, into what is now Eastern Europe, and then into Western Europe, and then also spreading out onto the different continents. He will go through spreading into Australia and North and South America, across the Bering Strait, up where Russia and Alaska meet, and then down into some of the Pacific Islands, and so he will explore that, and I think that you'll get a very good picture of how he believes the world spread out and the migrations happened, and so this map will give you a good perspective of that. Okay, and then in chapter 2, he moves into how the first hunter and gatherers moved in and settled into specific regions, and that kind of created this time period of agriculture and the first farming communities. You can see here 10,000 BCE to roughly 3,000 BCE, and the things that you'll need to pay attention to for your learning objectives in this part of the week's reading is tracing the development of these different agricultural groups and how they were different in different perspectives of the world. I'll show you a map here in a minute, but all of the different locations throughout the world had different climates, different temperatures, different issues, quote unquote, that each of these people groups needed to deal with. And so pay attention to the development of that and the variation of that as you read. And then again, I want you to consider the different social implications of these farming communities. Did their social structures change, or did they stay the same? As far as relationship between men and women, between those in authority and those not, how exactly did that work itself out? Okay, again, here's another map from your textbook. This one's from page 58. Again, it shows the some of the very key areas of some of the first farming communities, or agricultural communities as Strayer calls them. And in this chapter, Strayer will highlight how and why some of the hunter and gatherers joined together, why some of them settled down and actually stayed in particular areas. He will talk about some of the kind of the environmental factors, as in the decline of the Ice Age and how that opened up some areas to settle in, and then he'll explore how that how agriculture changed the ability of people to settle. What that change looked like, and how it it changed the way they lived. It changed what they did for a living, if you will. It changed it allowed for a change in technology, And so those are things that you'll be paying attention to in this chapter on the first farmers and the rise of agriculture. And then your third chapter for the week is called First Civilizations, Cities, States, and Unequal Societies. This is 3500 BCE to roughly 500 BCE. And there are several learning objectives that I want you to pay attention to in this chapter. So I would like for you to just kind of jot these down in your notes and pay attention to them as you'll be reading. One of the first things that Strayer will do is explore when, where, and how the first civilizations arose in human history. And then he will, one of the reasons I really like Strayer is because of his influence, or his emphasis on social, kind of social history. How did each of these groups live, and how was it different from before? And so second learning objective is he will explore how the emergence of civilizations transformed how humans lived and how their societies were structured. Okay, within that, he'll go through several different types of societies throughout the world, and he will look at how they differed from one another. So that's another thing that I want you to pay attention to. You know, how was China different than the Roman Empire, different than the empires in, I'm sorry, we're not at the Roman Empire yet. I'm getting ahead of myself. How did the Fertile Crescent, okay, Mesopotamia, some of those ancient Egypt, how did that differ from China? How did that differ from North and South America? And then the third thing that I would like for you to focus on, I think we're on 3, maybe number 4, is what was the outcome of these civilizations? Many of them have left a continuing influence on our world today. I mean, even 5,000 years ago, they still have an influence on our world today, both positive and negative. So keep that in mind as you're reading, and pay attention to some of those connections. And then these are other things that I would like for you to kind of pay attention to as you go through your reading in chapter 3. The different characteristics of the civilizations that Strayer will talk about. Okay, he talks about the rise of cities. He talks about the rise of culture within those cities, within those civilizations. What were they producing? He'll talk about the marketplace. You know, what were they buying and selling and producing as far as goods were concerned? He will focus on the specialization of work, especially within the cities, within those urban communities. And then he will also spend a lot of time in each of the civilizations talking about social life. What was, how did rich versus poor and class, and what was the relationship between men and women? What did that look like, and how was that the same in these different civilizations, and how was that different? So those are things that come out of these first major civilizations, and with that, that's pretty much the end of the lecture for the week. So I hope that you will keep those learning objectives in mind as you go throughout your reading, because you will begin to see trends and themes. And so with that, go ahead and dive into the week's work, and I will be praying for you as you go through it. And with that, I'll see you next week. Thanks.